Welcome. This podcast is an exploration into being human and what's possible when there's less attention on the noise in our heads. Warning. While listening to this broadcast, you may experience moments of deep peace, sighs of relief, personal insights, or long stretches of dead air. Do not be afraid. This is normal. Under the Noise with Wyn Morgan and Kate Roberts. Welcome to this week's episode of Under the Noise with me, Wyn Morgan, and my fabulous co-host, Kate Roberts. Hello, Kate.
Hey, Wyn.
How you doing?
I'm well.
Good. We're delighted to be joined today by a good friend for a long time, actually, and someone who I just sit down with and have coffee, and I deepen my understanding of what it is to be a human being every time it happens. So delighted to welcome Aaron Turner. Welcome, Aaron. Good to have you here.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you guys.
So Kate and I were talking about who would do the introduction, and Kate decided, given I'd known you longer, it would be my time to do that. And probably Aaron and I go back to possibly the late 80s, drinking in the same pub or being in the same nightclub at around 1988, 89, 1990 in Swansea, my hometown, which is where Aaron Turner went to university. So it's likely when we swap notes about where we used to go on a Friday and Saturday that we'd been in the same place at the same time and not knowing each other for quite a while afterwards, until April of 2012 when we met properly for the very first time in Los Angeles. So we went from Swansea in the 80s to Los Angeles in 2012 and here on Under the Noise in 2024.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a span of time, Aaron.
It is. That's right.
Now, this came back to my mind yesterday in spending time with somebody. Something that you said, and it sounded like off the cuff. Just one of those comments that you'd make occasionally that always made me smile, laugh, and then be really tickled with its profundity. Now, just bear in mind there's a slight profanity coming up, folks, if you're listening, okay? Just bear in mind, okay, there's a slight profanity coming up here. But I quote, Dr. Aaron Turner said something to the effect of, listening to an insecure thought is the psychological equivalent of eating a turd. And, right, I laughed, and then I went, wait a minute. He's got a point, right? And after you stopped laughing and quite a few people on the class stopped laughing for a bit, he said, because it's just full of bacteria. It makes us feel bad, and it's just yuck. But the great thing is, you said, it's even cleaner than that, because as soon as we stop thinking and stop listening to that insecure thought, the effects are gone.
Mm.
So I remember vividly hearing that, and it's probably 6 years ago that you said that, listening to an insecure thought. And what I really loved in that is that a lot of people heard it as having an insecure thought. Which is not what you said, and it's not what you meant. It was actually listening to an insecure thought that pops into our head. And I want to say years later that still reminds me of when I'm listening to mine, which I have plenty that pop into my head, how powerful that single line was all those years ago.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that. But that's the end of the profanity, potentially for now, everyone, so you can now relax again. Aaron, I'd love you to share what's fresh and new for you to kick us off today.
Well, yeah, I was wondering about that. I've been, ever since I really started to appreciate that the principles that Sydney Banks shared were a real discovery. I felt like I had everything I needed to kind of keep learning in a useful direction in life. So I've kind of followed them like they were a guide. So you keep learning, but what's fresh for me is I've been focused on the principles kind of as a, a complete premise, everything you need, partly through doing the simple premise program for the 3PGC. This is kind of a long way of saying it, but that idea of a simple premise was how I was following the principles. But in being more conscious of sharing that with others, it's kind of gotten more fundamental for me, because what I started to realize is that it's our orientation towards them as a truth that's powerful. And it really shifted my learning, because it just slapped me in the face. Oh, you don't need to understand them. You don't need to get a deeper understanding. You just need to consider that that's what's going on. That's all that's going on. And it's highly camouflaged, but you kind of have a, like in the old encyclopedias on the maps, they'd have a decoding thing. Red stands for this, blue stands for this. You have that. And what happened was I kind of learned from myself that, oh my God, it's so much simpler than I've been treating it in the name of saying it's simple. And I think a lot of my attempts to kind of understand it have kind of started to fade out. And it's almost like I don't need to do anything. I don't need to understand it. I just need to be willing to consider that that's the explanation of everything. Not that I understand everything, but I could go in the direction of understanding just through that, not by doing anything. And I think what's happened is that I've been sitting with what the principles point to as a description, as opposed to applying it. So like I'm coming back to it rather than pasting it on everything else, which until this very moment, I didn't realize I was doing. I didn't realize I was doing that. So I would go into a business and I would say, oh, I'll just paste it all over everything. That's the state of mind. That's the state of mind, which worked great compared to what they were doing before. But now I've kind of just been sitting in the fact of it. Not that I understand the full fact of it. I know I don't, but just sitting in the fact of it. And the breadth and depth of that fact to it is kind of seems more obvious. It seems more obvious. So kind of it's starting to dawn on me just how far that consideration could take you, just how deep it is that we're experiencing an illusion of thought, that we're the energy of life, and that the only thing that's in the way of our freedom and enlightenment is kind of what you said before, the belief in our thoughts. And I know that there's a deeper simplicity of that creeping up on me, because it's starting to make me nervous. It's like, that fairground thing that lifts you up slowly, and then you sit at the top and oh God, we're gonna go down. And it's really quite profound. I was as I was saying to you guys earlier, I went to this taco restaurant yesterday, and they had this thing. So you choose tacos, and then you choose your filling, and then you have to choose your sauce. They had 5 levels. They had like not spicy at all. Then they had a little bit spicy, and then they put in there, this is for wimps. And then they had spicy, and then they had, yeah, that's respectable. And then they had really spicy, and then super spicy. This is going to be painful. And obviously I opted for the middle one. But I think that's kind of one of the things that's kind of niggling in my mind. It's like, wow, you take this as far as, this could go as far as you want, or you take it as far as you're comfortable. I think like our Like how open are we to like completely dropping out of our reality or what we think life is or what we think we are, and like a whole, when someone falls down when they're skiing and it's a yard sale, it's a yard sale because all of their stuff is just scattered all over the ski slope, right? Like, how up for a yard sale are we? Like, because when you really think about it, I'm not think about it, but when I sit in just how profound this could be, like just how much of what we're experiencing is thought, you start to feel like we're attached to a lot more of it than we realize, I think. Well, at least I am. And that's what that nervousness is. It's like, ooh, am I really up for a wholesale? And I am. I know it's all good in principle. Like, I know it's all good, but not to the point where it doesn't create a nervousness. And that interests me. Like, that really interests me. It's like, you could go as far as you want into a deeper reality, but that kind of fear that's caused by our personal thoughts about reality, I don't know, I'm just interested in that at the moment. Because where I'm sitting is, I can really feel, wow, there's no bottom to that well. Theoretically, in a good way. But I can also feel like, there are some thoughts that feel like I trust them that are like not totally up for that. And I just think I'm just interested in that at the moment. I'm just interested in that. So that's what's fresh for me. I guess the simplicity of the profundity is giving me a feel for like, wow, this is so simple and there's so much possible. And then in the face of that, having that experience of like, ooh, I'm not so sure. So that's it.
Aaron, what do you think and when you can hear those kind of things in your personal mind about, I don't know if I'm up for that yet. Like, what does that sound like? What's at stake?
Well, it's not that conscious. It's not that conscious. It's like, have you ever looked down a height and gotten, had a fear looking down a big height? It's that feeling. It's that feeling. Just like, ooh, ooh, Yeah, there's no real content to it. Yeah, it's just like and it makes me wonder, like, do we dose out our own insights to the level we're comfortable with?
I wonder if wisdom knows that about us, like what we're ready for in any given moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, at a fundamental level, that's us too, right? So it's like, we know. So I'm like, am I playing with myself here? Because it's in at a different level. It's us on both sides, like the personal thinking and and the wisdom. Yeah.
Question, Aaron. How often does this happen to you when you know you're at another edge, at the potential of another big insight?
I don't know. I think it's somewhat random, because I think there are times where, and I think I've spent good amounts of time in a certain formulation of understanding and just stuck with that for a while and just, kind of just been in my own interpretation. And I guess it's phases. I don't know what you guys find, but I guess it's phases. Like, I think there are phases when, I'm less sure about where I'm at, and as a result, I'm more open. Or phases where, you're kind of up against it and you're struggling and you come out of it and you learn a lot. Or I think at the moment, I think for me, what it is at the moment is that I'm just seeing that I know a lot less than I assumed I did. So I'm less solid in where I'm at. So I'm more open. So it's almost like opening a window and having a breeze. That's kind of that. And I wouldn't say that necessarily means a big insight, but it is nice because you catch glimpses of new things. I think that's what's been happening. I've just catch glimpses of new things. Like I'm listening to people with more. This is such a terrible thing to say. I just said I don't think I've been doing anything bad. I'm listening to people with more humility, which makes me think, oh my God, what were you doing before? But it's fascinating, these different levels of things. Yeah, I think I'm listening with more humility, and as a result, I'm seeing more. I'm getting more feelings outside of my own frame of reference, which is just nice in itself. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because it feels like it's just such a funny thing to say. I don't mean to say this the way I'm already analyzing what I'm saying, but it's almost like, I think because it's just felt like, well, this is true. So it's nothing to worry about. It's nothing to think about. But it's also true that it's something I don't really know. I don't really fully know it. I don't know it. And so I guess there's more comfort not having to know, like not having to have somewhere to stand, not having to have anything to hang your hat on, because, well, I don't know, because just, and as a result, kind of being able to kind of listen fresh. And it's interesting. It's almost like the possibilities of understanding kind of open up a bit more. Because there are even times, sorry, I hope I'm not going on too much. There are even times where I'm listening to someone and I can hear my personal mind saying, yeah, that fits there, that fits there, that fits there, right? But there's another part where I'm also like, oh, that's interesting. Wow, that's it. So there's like the two the two things in the listening. Whereas this the kind of knowing what box to put everything in sometimes is a bit too dominant. But I think because it's been less dominant for whatever reason, it's been I don't know. Taking things in a bit fresher or a bit outside of what I understand has been opened up a bit more space, I would say. But it's funny with the principles, isn't it? Because it's very easy to get into a way of thinking about it where you can explain everything and learn nothing. And I definitely have done a lot of that. And I might say enjoyed it.
I would imagine that that's pretty normal for people that have made this conversation and teaching and coaching, their profession. That's a place to come back to all the time.
Yeah, I think so too. You could even say it's kind of one of the pitfalls. Yeah. The only way to pick it up is in the feeling. That feeling that, oh, yeah, I know.
I imagine that's a sneaky one, because there's an expectation that you know, and you're going to explain and teach.
Yeah. I think for me, the first thing that clued me into that feeling was just the insensitivity of it. I think when we think when I see people, or when I'm in that feeling like I know, I'm gonna lay this out for you. That feeling of not really being open or free-minded around it. There's I don't know. I think there's an insensitivity to it. You're not really in touch with people so much. You're not really responsive to people so much. Oh, sorry.
Wonder if the mouse is back.
No, do you want a metaphor for what I just said? Is I'm home working from home today, and Leela's been out, and I forgot I was home alone, and so I put the chain on the door. It's a perfect timing. I saw her at the window, and I'm like, oh. What's new for you guys these days?
Well, what I would have said 2 weeks ago is now out of date. And the reason is because I've got to that place where I think I know something else now. And I'm in that place where it feels a little stale, and at the risk of having compassion fatigue and, being very eager to tell people what's really up with them when they're telling me stuff. And it happened twice yesterday morning. Because I noticed from the spring of this year, I took another deep dive to understand and learn more. Really open-minded. And you and I, Aaron, have had lots of conversations about that over various events, actually. Whether you remember them or not is a different story, but I certainly have. and took a lot from them. And I've noticed how much more relaxed my mind's been as the only thing I've had any want of any notice of. How relaxed is my mind?
Mm.
And it's paid off amazingly in this last 6 months. And now I'm at a stage where I think I've thingified it in my mind. So it's now more solid and it's now a thing to do as opposed to a nice place to come from. And I don't know what's next
That's
beyond that, but I've seen that I've just bumped up against what you were talking about a few minutes ago.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, it's so useful to know that that's a natural process. We do that because then you kind of like, oh, there it is.
I remember being stuck there thinking I knew when I had it out. And I was, there, and what my solid ground was my biggest asset. And I think it was something like in 2016, I just realized that the feeling was horrible in it. And I went, well, this can't be it. What the heck have I done? What am I not open to? What am I fixated around? And it didn't take long for that to melt.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Actually, there's something, and anybody who has listened to all the episodes that we've put out knows that this is an open question for me. But it's something, Aaron, that you're, having listened to a lot of your stuff, especially Simple Premise, you're very solid in this. And I would love to hear anything that shows up for you around it. But I'm always wondering, like, I feel like I've gotten to a point where so much of the things that show up in my personal mind, and a lot of times I'm still believing it, but when I'm not, it's like I don't I don't trust it anymore, and I don't value it anymore like I used to, at least. But there's always this question of willingness. Is that the only, like, I'm wondering if that's like the only thing that we do, that we're responsible for, is a willingness. Because there's always this, like, forever, is this a choice? Am I actually choosing this? Or is life being done by something so much deeper inside me, right? And it's been this open question for me. And you seem so solid in that it's, we've been given free choice, and my choice is, am I willing? And obviously, in your words today, which I love, like, how spicy do I want my life? Like, how spicy do I want it? Like, is that our free choice, is just a willingness? And you're very solid in that. And sometimes I still wonder, like, am I actually choosing to look in this direction? Or is life just doing that for me? Like, how much is mine to do, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, when you say that, Kate, what comes to mind is I mean, my sense is it really is in our hands. But I don't know that we can only appreciate the degree to which it's in our hands through an increased understanding of who and what we are, right? So, for example, I would have said that exactly what you said. Yeah, I have complete freedom, what I put stock in my experience, complete freedom. But then listening to you, and I think that's true, but then listening to you, the bigger question is, well, what am I? Because if I think of myself as Aaron Turner, then that's one way of looking at where the willingness comes from. And that would be one way to take a hold of it. But if I see, well, no, I'm an aspect of a pure spiritual energy, that would be a completely different way to take a hold of it. And the question is, who do we want to be in charge here? Right? Because if I think I'm Aaron Turner, that's a very different place to make those decisions from than, no, Aaron Turner is not where it's at. He's kind of a complete illusion. He's just a vehicle for a spiritual intelligence to operate in this dimension. That's a completely different answer to exactly the same question. And I think that's kind of what's been happening to me is I've been really, what's actually this happened last week. I don't know how to say this, but it dawned on me that I'm an aspect of the spirit. And in a new way, it dawned on me. Obviously, if I really saw it, I'd be enlightened, but it dawned on me in a purer way because I don't know, what came out of it is I realized, oh, I'm not trying to be me. That's not the point. That's not what I'm up to. I'm not trying to be me. I want to bring, as a spiritual intelligence, I want to bring something to this dimension. But I've gotten into the habit of trying to be me. Right? And what really stood out to me is that I had so much clarity about that when I was a kid, but I thought it was because I was a kid, not because it was a pure experience of a spiritual essence. And what I realized last week is that I've been living as if I'm an age. So I'm living as if I'm Aaron Turner, born in 1969, lived, did this, did that. Yeah, that's true, but that's not where I want the decision to come from. I want the decision to come from that purity of spirit. That's what I want to be me. That's where I want to see. That's what I think I am. And it's so interesting. I haven't talked about this at all. But all the ways in which I'd gotten confused about who I am, what I'm deciding about, what it relates to, what I'm up to in this reality, I'd gotten so confused. I thought I was me, Aaron Turner, 55 years old, doing one thought, teaching the principles. I have a family. All that's true, but I was living it as if that's what it was about. That's where it was coming from. That's what it was in relation to. Whereas actually, I hadn't meant to do that. I didn't mean to do that. I kind of gotten confused along the way. I'd meant to have the decision come from that purity of the spirit, being about the purity of the spirit in the life of Aaron Turner as a vehicle. And getting a little bit more clarity about that really helped. Like, I think we do have complete free will. We have complete free will to live as Aaron Turner. I can make all my decisions based on the principles in the best interest of Aaron Turner, no problem. But I didn't mean to do that. I don't want to do that. That's not what I don't feel like I'm here for that. I didn't want to, that's not what I'm up to. But that's what I was doing to some degree, and still am doing, because like I said, I'm not enlightened. So I don't know why that didn't work. But that now I realize that really when we talk about clarity of mind, we're talking about a more purely spiritual consciousness, a less psychologically affected consciousness, a less worldly affected consciousness, worldly thought affected consciousness. And last week, I realized that that's where I want decisions to come from. That's where I want my free will. That's the intelligence. That's the consciousness. That's the purity. That's the essence that I want my free will to be governed by. But we have complete free will to do either. So how profound is that as free will? I could live as Aaron Turner and see what I can get out of things, and see what I can do, and I can totally do that. And I can think and live and make decisions as if what's good for Aaron Turner doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't make me happier. Well, that's because there's a reality to this. It is a spiritual reality. But then I also have the free will to say, well, that's not where I want my free will to come from. I want my free will to come from a purer version of myself.
And what does that look like for you?
Well, it has a purity of energy. It just has a purity of energy. It feels right. It feels like the feeling this is going to sound ridiculous, but it feels like the feeling I came into this world with. That's what it feels like. And it feels like the knowing that was in the feeling that I came into this world with. And I thought that was an innocence of childhood, but I realized that that's a less contaminated spiritual consciousness. That's more like the soul in its own right, as opposed to the soul living through the experience of being a person in the world. As Sid said, as soon as we're born, as soon as we see an external reality, we're contaminated, we're confused. As soon as that happens. And what's really interesting is it didn't really, after I had that realization, it didn't really affect me at all. Like, I went to the gym the same, had dinner the same, all that the same, but there's something so clarifying about knowing, that, I don't know, there's like I don't even know how to say it, because all the words are wrong, like a purity of knowing, a purity of sensation. It's like it's almost like I think our conscience is a good example of that. I think that an example of that spiritual nature, that spiritual knowledge is conscience. It's not optional. Like, we have values and we judge things based on our values. I think this is good. I think that is bad. I didn't listen to them. I felt bad. But there's something purer, which is like when we do something that isn't right, we know. We know. Now, you don't have to accept what you know. You can justify it. You can reframe it. But we know, like, we know. And it can be a tiny thing or it could be a big thing. But we know. And that's because that spiritual intelligence, that spiritual level of purity is pure knowledge. So it's pure knowledge. And that's why realizing, oh, that's where I want the decisions to come from is clarifying. It's really clarifying. Oh, whoa. Thus far, it's been clarifying, you know. The couple of times I've thought about it. Yeah. Anyway, I haven't really thought about that until now, but I don't know if that even answers your question or not.
For me, conscience doesn't feel like a debate. Like it just is.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a knowing either way.
Yeah.
But it's a lack of a conversation. It's just, I don't even know if it has a good feeling or a bad feeling. It just is a knowing. It's very simple, I think. At least for me. What about you, Wyn?
My knee-jerk reaction to this is, well, I must have done something bad because my conscience often tells me that there's something underneath the floorboards of my mind that that is bringing me back. But I think that that's not conscience. I think that's just ego. I think I've picked that up. That's not pure. But here's what I've loved in listening to this last, I don't know, 20 minutes or so is how little I know and how little it's possible for me to know and how freeing that is. Really freeing. Going back to the whole reset of the version of me that was born wasn't naive. It wasn't because I didn't know better. No, that at that point, it was great to not know anything, uncontaminated. And then I picked up a lot of mistruths along the way in the past 50 odd years, including playing the role of the Wyn Morgan version of me, the made up version that I've innocently taken on. And to know that I've never heard free will, as far as I'm aware, I've never heard free will being discussed in the way that you've just mentioned it, Aaron. And that was a big eye opener for me. A big mind opener for me. But I also know that, well, whether it's, different words for different things, I know the feeling of being pulled and guided as opposed to being in my head. An egoic pull compared to a gut pull.
Mm.
And I think they're just different words for the same thing because it's very difficult to put form to this, but it's the best we got.
Mm.
But I'm really enjoying the notion of suspending everything I think I've learned to know again and go back to the beginning.
Mm.
I love that notion.
Mm.
I'm glowing inside pondering it now.
Yeah, I really love the way that you spoke about free will being guided by that deeper part of us. Like we could have our free will guided by Aaron Turner, right? Aaron Turner and his life and his needs and personality, and but to have free will being used by something else.
Mm.
And I love the way you described it as like what you knew coming in to this life. There's a purity to that. It doesn't really feel like, Kate and all the personal thinking that makes that. But it's pure. I love that. It feels pure. Aaron, thanks so much for being here on the show.
It's a pleasure. I was just, what was running through my mind is all of this is very new. I haven't really talked to anybody about it. I hadn't even realized, it's kind of like spelling it out is brand new. And some of it just came from listening to you when you were asking me that question or when you were talking about free will. So thank you guys. I feel like I've really gotten a feel for what's been bubbling in the back, and kind of I've had my own realizations about what's kind of occurring to me over the last little while. So I really appreciate it. I feel like I've learned a lot in this conversation, which is I'm very touched by. Really nice.
Too.
Thank you. This has been amazing.
And thanks, Wyn. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
You've been listening to Under the Noise. I'm Kate Roberts, here with my co-host Wyn Morgan and today's guest, Aaron Turner. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us. We'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and review. If you have a topic or question that you'd like us to chat about, email Wyn or Kate at wyn@winning.co.uk and Kate at katerobertscoaching.com. Until then, enjoy what's possible under the noise.